Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a nice lunch. Okay. So previously, my colleague Alexis talked about gender-based violence during peacetime. Now I am going to discuss about conflict-related sexual violence during war. My title is The Role of Transitional Justice in Addressing Conflict-Related Sexual Violence, the case of Northern Ethiopia. I am from Ethiopia and a graduate studies at Global Studies at UNC. First, let's see what conflict-related sexual violence means. The UN defines it as rape, sexual slavery, forced prostitution, forced pregnancy, and other forms of sexual violence which are perpetrated against women, men, girls, or boys that is directly or indirectly linked to a conflict. So conflict-related sexual violence is widely used by different countries in these modern warfares. So how can countries move away from gross human rights violations, such as conflict-related sexual violence, to reconciliation and peace? One of the mechanisms that is widely used by different countries is called transitional justice. The International Center for Transitional Justice defines transitional justice as the full range of processes and mechanisms associated with a society's attempts to come to terms with a legacy of large-scale past abuses to ensure accountability, serve justice, and achieve reconciliation. Transitional justice consists of both judicial and non-judicial processes and mechanisms, including prosecution initiatives, truth-seeking, reparation programs, institutional reforms. Countries might choose to implement a combination of these. Today, I'm going to discuss about what happened in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is the second most populous country in Africa. And as of 2024, it has 124 million people. Ethiopia is home to 80 ethnic groups, and it has a history of 3,000 years, and it's called the cradle of human beings. Within Ethiopia, there are different ethnic groups. The majority are the Oromos and the Amharas. The rest of the ethnic groups are minority groups. The war involved the federal government of Ethiopia and the Tigray regional states. The population of Tigray is also considered as minority ethnic group. The main causes of the war include political power struggle between the federal government of Ethiopia and the Tigray regional state, and historical resentments between different ethnic groups, including the neighboring country, Eritrea. As you can see, Ethiopia is found in the Horn of Africa, and it was engaged in a bloody war, and it's considered one of the deadliest war of the 21st century. This war involved the federal government of Ethiopia and the Tigray regional state. The war spread to the neighboring countries, to the neighboring regions of Amhara regional state and Afar regional state. And in this war, Eritrea was involved on the side of the federal government of Ethiopia, and the Amhara militia also was involved to attack Tigray. So the war is known as Northern Ethiopia conflict or Tigray war because major battles were fought in Tigray regional state. When it spread to the Amhara and Afar regional states. The war lasted for 2 years. So what are the consequences of the Northern Ethiopian war? The death toll is estimated to be between 600,000 to 1 million. The estimates are contested. Different sources release different numbers. In 2021, 5.1 million people were displaced, and it's the largest in a single year. One of the major causes of the major consequences of the war is the damage of infrastructures, such as health facilities and schools. 85% of health centers and 70% of hospitals in Tigray regional states were destroyed. 2,400 health facilities were destroyed in Amhara and Afar regional states. And in 2022, the US government estimates that 900,000 people endured famine in Tigray. In 2024, around 20 million people need food aid. This is released by World Food Program. When we see the number of women and girls who experienced sexual violence ranges from 10,000 to 100,000. UN reviewing hospital document estimate that over 10,000 women and girls experienced sexual violence. Other statisticians estimate it reaches up to 100,000. So what are the causes of sexual violence? The main causes of sexual violence include gender inequality, lack of protection and support, culture of acceptance or normalizing sexual violence, lack of laws, lack of convictions, using rape as a weapon of war, and groups perpetrating sexual violence to intimidate and humiliate their opponents. What are the consequences of sexual violence? It includes physical pain, pregnancy, HIV/AIDS, and hepatitis B, mental health problems, fistula, reproductive organ injuries and disorders, isolation and stigma. An NGO called Physicians for Human Rights conducted a study and it reviewed documents of 305 patients in Tigray, and it found out that 27% of the survivors tested positive for pregnancy, 11% of them tested positive for HIV/AIDS. Due to the destruction of health facilities, survivors faced double victimization. And the worst thing that the study shows that is 76% of the survivors reported that they were raped by more than one perpetrator. And they claimed that 96% of the perpetrators were military or paramilitary groups. And they also claimed that 99% of the perpetrators were unknown to them. So Ethiopia chose to implement transitional justice process around in 2018 when Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed took power and he tried to implement different political reforms. So between 2018 to 2024, there were different developments to implement transitional justice. And the first phase is called rejection phase. So there was lots of rejections. By 2019, Ethiopia already established Ethiopian Reconciliation Commission, and it was taking different initiatives, and the war broke out in 2020, and the UN Office of Human Rights and the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission conducted an investigation and came up with reports of gross human rights violation, including conflict-related sexual violence. Between 2022 and 2023, Ethiopia has been taking initiatives to implement transitional justice processes. So 2023 is considered as the design phase, and different technical working groups were established and the national consultations were conducted. And by 2024, Ethiopia has already a zero draft transitional justice policy. So the war started in 2020 and it ended in 2022 when the Pretoria Peace Agreement was signed, which was brokered by African Union. This peace agreement was signed between the federal government of Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front. So these are the major articles of the peace agreement. It's also called the Cessation of Hostilities Agreement. So I'm going to focus on the two articles. These are the protection of civilians and transitional measures. The article on protection of civilians states that parties who are involved in the war should condemn gender-based violence or sexual violence. And it also states that Ethiopia should implement transitional measures. So as a principle, transitional justice can play role in addressing conflict-related sexual violence by, there are different mechanisms. Countries can establish truth commissions, document the violations of rights against women. They can also establish domestic and hybrid courts. They need also they should also implement reparation plans, compensation. There is a need to prepare educational materials and create awareness. The other one is the guarantee of non-recurrence. Ethiopia also promised to implement disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration of former combatants, institutional reforms. Many of the defense forces, the Eritrean Defense Force, the Federal Defense Force, and the military forces in the regional state were implicated perpetrating sexual violence. So there is a need to reform. There is a need for security sector reform. So what were some of the responses that were taken to address the needs of survivors in Tigray, Amhara, and Afar regions? Some organizations were involved in responding to these grave human rights violations. This include Tigray Crisis Response. They were giving urgent post-rape care. Dr. Denis Mukwege Foundation conducted an in-depth study and amplified survivors' voices and advocate for justice. Physicians for Human Rights also conducted research, and they were involved in documenting and raising awareness. And in 2021, UNFPA targeted to support 112,000 women, girls, boys by expanding women and girls safe spaces. The Ethiopian government also established one-stop center. 6 of them are found in Tigray, and 8 of them are found in Amhara and Afar regional states. So when we see the initiatives that were taken, they were not enough. As you have seen, there was mass perpetration of sexual violence against women and girls. Most of them were not able to access basic, essential responses due to the destruction of hospitals and health centers. Some of them were accessing a year after the war ended. So what is missing from the transitional justice mechanism? Gender justice approach to transitional justice mechanism is missing. What this means is survivors need, we need to address the immediate and strategic needs of the short-term and long-term needs of survivors. And we don't read reports of what's happening. Generally, the implementation of the transitional justice policy is slow. After the peace agreement was signed in 2022, we are now in 2024. But when we read the implementation report, what is done to address the gross human rights violation of women, or is the Ethiopian government implementing survivor-centered approach to address the needs of conflict-related sexual violence? We are not reading all those reports, and the support from the international community is not as as much as the need, because we know that many women were suffered because of this war, and they are not getting the support they need. Some of them are not coming out to start with. So their needs are not met, let alone their justice is served or reparation programs are in place. So I have been working as a gender professional for the past 10 years. And as I am a Rotary Peace Fellow, I spent taking different courses at UNC and Duke, and I plan to use my knowledge and skill to support the implementation of transitional justice in Ethiopia by making sure that gender lens is applied to the transitional justice mechanisms. And I urge everyone, social workers, health professionals, lawyers, to support the country to come out of this gross human rights violation, because Ethiopia adopted the Africa Union Transitional Justice Framework, but it needs lots of expertise to implement these mechanisms. Thank you.